Hey everybody, Coach here. Hey, thanks for tuning in for this week's episode where we're going to learn about landscape wiring. Landscape wiring for your irrigation and landscape wiring for your landscape lighting. I am sure glad you are here, so let's get rolling. First of all, I'd like to thank Jose, a viewer that wrote into us and said, hey, maybe you could teach us a little bit about landscape irrigation wiring. So that's why I put this together, not only for the irrigation side, but also for the lighting side. So Jose, here you go. If you're still watching, I hope you are. Maybe you'll learn just a little bit extra besides the text dialogue that we had back and forth. So let's get some safety things out of the way first of all. You know, as creators, we have to cover our butts when it comes to doing stuff here on social media. And when I'm giving you professional advice, especially about electrical stuff, I always say, remember landscape irrigation and landscape lighting generally deals with 12-volt systems. That does not mean that you don't have high voltage involved. You are going to plug in that irrigation timer or that landscape transformer timer into a high voltage plug. But that's kind of where the high voltage threat ends right there. The rest of it is 99%, 12-volt system all the way. Can you get shocked? Yes, you can get shocked, but only 12 volts, which is barely more than a 9-volt battery. So if you have any fears of doing anything electrical, whether it be high voltage or low voltage, please listen to the video here, pick up tips and tricks on how to do it, and then turn it over to a pro. I'd really encourage you to try to do it yourself though. The only time that I've ever heard of anything going wrong where people have been shocked with high voltage is when they deviated from the manuals that they're given when to install these appliances, and they just did something weird. They didn't do it according to plan, and that's when people have been nipped. So allay your fears aside, try it on your own, and if it doesn't work, go get some professional help. But basically, if you know how to plug in your toaster, if you know how to plug in your hair dryer or your espresso machine, you can deal with these things as well. So if you don't mind, let's cover irrigation first, and then we'll wrap it up with landscape lighting wiring for the second half. What do you say? All right, let's dive into it. When you're dealing with irrigation wiring, you're dealing with a controller timer that has two different facets to it. One is an indoor timer, one that should be placed and mounted in a protected area out of the weather. And then you have your outdoor rated timers, which can handle either or. They can handle the weather outside, or you can put them inside. When I was practicing, I used nothing but outdoor timers, and I mounted them on exterior walls and I mounted them on interior walls because they could do both. And you know, they were just comfortable for me to use. You get to know a particular appliance like that, and you just repeat it through each and every job. And so I knew them inside and out. I knew how they worked. I knew how to program them. I knew how to teach the programming to my customers. So the outdoor rated timers was all I used, but they do have those indoor ones. So what's the difference between the two? The indoor timers, they are the face plate of an outdoor timer. They don't have that protective case around it, and they're mounted in a protective area, where the outdoor ones, they have a protective case, a rubber gasket, and a lockability generally on that outdoor case, so you can provide security, and kids, neighbors, landscapers, gardeners don't mess with your timer. So let's just take a second and we'll take a look at an outdoor rated timer, and we'll take a look at an indoor rated timer so you have a good idea when you go to the store which is which. So here is an outdoor rated timer. Okay, so here's an indoor rated timer, and you can see the difference between the two. So in wiring these things up and making them functional, what are the differences? Well, the outdoor rated timer, you are going to have a separate, generally a 3 or 6 foot long exterior rated type of pigtail wire with a plug at the end that you're going to plug in. And you wire it by bringing it up inside that exterior case and into a small plastic box inside the timer. And you're going to wire your 3 pigtails with your corresponding 3 internal wires, put some Scotch locks on them, push them into the box, seal the box, and that's the wiring for power on an outdoor rated timer. Now on the indoor ones, you're going to have one less step. You're going to have generally a 2-strand wire, and that 2-strand wire goes inside and up into the 2 common and power lugs that are at the base of the interior side of that timer. And then you're going to have a handheld transformer, which is going to extend away from the timer, and you're going to plug it into a wall socket. That's the wiring of both outdoor and indoor. So wiring up and plugging in is the whole extent of any sort of high voltage exposure that you're going to have. Like I said before, if you know how to plug in appliances. You've done it indoors for most of your life. So there is no difference here. You're just doing the wiring portion of it. And if you don't want to listen to Coach, you just want to pay attention to the manufacturer's directions, by all means do it. I'm just giving you a little bit of a shortcut and some steps that the actual directions won't tell you. Okay, so let's talk about the wiring. The actual wiring that goes from your timer controller outside into the yard to your automated valves. Whether they are the inline valves that you've put underground in a box or the anti-siphon valves that are exposed and resting up above the ground level. The types of wire that we use is irrigation sprinkler wire. And most common things are the multi-strand type of wires. Take a look here and I'll show you the types of wires that there are. Most of the time, you will use 3-strand, 5-strand, 7-strand, or 9-strand type of wire, depending on how many valves you have. Remember that out of that multicolored stranded wire, you're going to need 1 for your common wire and the rest of them for your valves and zones that you're wiring up. So, for instance, if you have a 4-valve system out in your yard, you're going to need a minimum of a 5-strand wiring system. 1 for the common wire and 4 for the colored ones that will eventually go out to the valves. Now, when I was doing the job, placing this irrigation wire was done several steps before wiring it up in the landscape project. Depending on each project, I had it either in irrigation or drainage trenches. I had it run from an indoor source, which I'll talk about here in a second, and a plug pulled through the wall, and I'd mount the timer right next to it, so I didn't need a lot of irrigation wire. But whatever it was, I started at the timer and finished at the valves. That's just the way I did it. So when you're doing this, it's only a suggestion, but like when you're doing electrical wiring for your house, you have the white wire as always for your neutral bar in your panel. Am I right? Okay. So I always use the white wire as the common wire. You can use whatever one you want, but once you designate that as the common wire, then it should be at the timer and out at the valves. I suggest you use the white wire. So that white wire, you're going to strip a little bit of the casing off. You're going to look at your lug line that's at the bottom of the box, where it has common and MV for master valve, and then zone 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever size timer you have. You're going to take that white wire, you're going to place it up into the COM or the common lug, and you're going to strip off the casing, have about 3/4 of an inch of copper, put it in there, and toggle it down secure. Do a little tug test. Now you're going to strip the remaining wires for however many valves you have. Let's say you have 4 valves, so we're going to have colors. Maybe you're going to have a yellow, a green, a blue, and a brown. and you know that which valves out there are going to serve what part of your yard. I suggest that you group your lawn sprinkler zones close together. Don't do number 1 and number 4 being your back lawn. Do number 1 and 2. That way part of the lawn comes on, then the other part of the lawn comes on. So you're going to take your first 2, put them into 1 and 2. You're going to toggle those down. Write it down on a Post-it or a note or whatever, and you're going to make that your corresponding color match to the valves out in the field. Do you understand? So green is going to be zone 1, yellow is going to be zone 1 in your timer. When you go out to your valve, yellow and green are going to activate the valves that run your lawn areas. Your 2 remaining ones, strip off the casing, put them in there. Maybe zone 3 is going to be your drip irrigation for your backyard. And zone 4 maybe is a vegetable garden or a greenhouse or whatever you're going to use it for. So now you've wired up your timer and controller. You have the common wire and you have the 4 colored ones matching the valves out in the field. So now place your face cover back up on. You've run your wire from the timer out to the valves, however you've had to do it. I have run wire in places I don't even want to talk about. Crawl spaces with ugly spiders, hot attics at 140 degrees. I have run wire everywhere to get it out to the valves. You're going to have to figure out how to do that. Now out at the valves, you're going to have two wires coming out of the solenoid at the top of the valve. Whether they're the inline valves, which I'll show you right here, or the anti-siphon valves, the ones that are above ground that look just like this. And when we're out at the valves now, we're going to take 1 wire from each solenoid, just 1 wire. And we are going to strip more casing off of it, so you have about 1 inch or so. And you're going to strip off the white wire that you had at the common in the timer. You're going to bring those solenoid wires together along with the common wire. You're going to twist them together and secure them with like a dry lock connector. And if you don't know what a dry lock connector is, they're Scotch locks and they look just like this. They basically are filled with dielectric grease and they waterproof your connection. So now out at the valves, you have completed the common connection between your timer controller and your valves. Now you're going to look at your notes, know which valve is serving what area of your yard, and you're going to wire up the corresponding colored ones that you've used. So if you have yellow and green being your lawns, brown and blue being the remainder of the yard, you're going to wire it accordingly. And you're going to take the remaining single wire from each solenoid and you're going to wire it together with the corresponding colored wire. So if yellow and green are your lawn zones, you're going to take the yellow wire and the remaining solenoid for that valve wire and secure it together. Probably with a smaller Scotch lock than the common grouping wire, because you've got more wires, and here on the colored one, it's kind of smaller. You don't want a loose connection, you want a pretty tight connection. So get small dry lock connectors, the smallest that they can make. So now you've completed the wiring out at the valve assembly. You probably have a little bit of a spaghetti mess going on. You got wires clustered here and going there. So what I used to do, as a suggestion to you, is to take the little twist ties that secured the solenoid wires when they came out of the box, take that twist tie off. You had to wire it up anyway. And then use those twist ties to carefully gather up and bundle and then twist tie all the wires together. And if you have enough length and space, you can take those and securely place them down in between one of the valves, whichever length works for you, and then use some electrical tape and tape it to the pipe. Or you can tape it or screw them carefully to the wall of the box if you're doing an inline system. You're done. The only thing you have to do now is test your work. You can do that by following the instructions on your timer controller. You can do a test. You can do a test by turning your dial to test, turning your time to 1 minute, activate your system, and run each valve separately from the timer controller. Each valve should go on, provided that your connections are good, you've done it according to directions, and your wire is continuous with no breaks and no problems. Congratulations. So let me show you in just a brief demonstration on how we're going to do from the timer out to the valves. Okay, let's do a little demonstration, shall we? Let's put together a couple of examples of the irrigation wiring, and I'll show you the parts and pieces that I've spoke about earlier. So, down on the workbench in front of me, let me show you what I got. And like some of you, you got to put on glasses to be able to see what you see. Okay, so here we've got our irrigation timer controller right out of the box, complete with instructions right there. And then like I spoke about, this is your cover plate. This is an outdoor rated timer. As you can see, it comes in the box. And we open up the lid. Here's our high volt connection point, which Rainbird for this particular has already done for you. It's already wired up. And here's our lug line that I told you about right there. And what you're going to be looking at for 95% of you, you're going to be looking for the C lug and then the numbered lugs, depending on how many valves you're going to serve. In this case, for our demonstration, we're going to hook up the common wire and just a single zone wire. That's all we're going to do. All right. So the tools that you're going to need, in this case, a little bit of wire stripper, wire cutters, and a simple screwdriver. That's it. This is a multi-one with a Phillips and a straight head on it. And of course, out in the field, you're going to have your valve. In this case, it's an anti-siphon valve, the kind that would sit up above grade. And then this is your solenoid that I spoke about. And here's your two wires coming from the solenoid. Remember, these are unipolar. It won't matter which white wire, or in this case, blue wire, goes to which wire. It will not matter. Just connect one to the other. Okay, and here's our irrigation wire. In this case, we have 4-strand wire. We have the white, which we're going to use as our common, and then we're going to use the blue wire for this particular demonstration. Now, if you have stranded wire that you have too many, what I used to do is I would just fold these down and then just wrap them around the remaining sheathing or cable so that they're out of the way and you only have the number of wires that you're going to deal with. So, coming down into the bottom of the box, you're going to insert this, and this right here, that hole, remember I mentioned to you about a PVC pipe that you could sleeve it so it looks nice and neat and it's protected. In the bottom down there, it's generally for 3/4. And the only thing I had was 1 inch. But for demonstration purposes, you get the idea. Now your cable going up inside there where it's exposed is nice and protected. Nice and protected, and you can paint this whatever color you want. The color of your house, some contrasting color, whatever, just to protect the PVC from UV light. So we're going to bring our irrigation wire up into the box. Real simplistic here. We're going to take our white common wire. We're going to find the common lug right there on the lug line. We are going to insert the stripped off part about 3/4 of an inch or less, and we'll put it in right in there, and then we will tighten this down. So there's your common wire inserted, and now your zonal wire, usually the colored wire, and we're going to put that in there under zone number 1 because we only have one valve. We're going to tighten it. Then we do a couple of tug tests on it, make sure it's secure, and it is. And for our demonstration, that's all you have to do to wire up the inside of the box. You can take your faceplate, put it back on, close the box for now. Here's your pigtail that you would run to your house socket, house plug, indoors, outdoors, whatever. Remember, if you're doing one outdoors, try to get yourself a protective bubble cover. It'll just extend the life of that plug outside. And then we're going to take, using our imagination here, this is the terminal end out in the yard at your valves, your valve assembly. And you're going to take the two wires, you're going to drop one, find your common wire. Now if you have 4, 6, 8 valves, whatever it might be, you're going to have 8 of these that you're going to gather up, and you're going to splice it into that white common wire. Like that. That's your common connection. Now your solenoid and the electrical connection at the valve is done for the common end, and it's connected to the controller and timer back here. Then your second wire. Your second wire you're going to bring up. You're going to find your colored wire for your zone, and you're going to do the same thing. And you're going to connect it up there as well. Now, if you get a couple of electrical connections, which I don't have here, you'll take and cover that, screw the Scotch locks down on it, and you're done. You're good. You're done with your irrigation wiring. It is literally that simple. And the only thing you have to do is make sure that you cover that, and then when you're all done with this spaghetti here, you can take it, wrap it up. The little twist ties I told you about that come off of the solenoid in its packaging, and you can twist these up and then place it down in here with the Scotch locks facing up, so water can't do this. So with the Scotch locks facing up, and then tape it to the valve or tape it to the pipe, either or. Pretty simple stuff. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, that's it for the irrigation side. Now, give me 1 second and I'll set up the lighting side. So hopefully everything worked for you. And if it did, bam, yay, good job. Now, if it didn't, you're gonna have to backtrack your steps. Check for continuity, maybe with a little ohm meter, and make sure when you're activating particular zones that everything shows that you have some millivolts coming into the valve itself. Now, one note of caution, and that is before you go activating your timer, you have to make sure that the water is on at the valves and that you have tested each valve manually so that you know you have water flow through there and it works. Now you're testing it for the electrical side of that valve. All right, let's move on to landscape lighting. You know, depending on the complexity of what your landscape lighting system is going to be, will not really change on how the wiring goes. There's only just a few components in a landscape wiring system. You have the transformer and timer, you have the wires which provide the power out to the fixtures, and you have connectors. Maybe you have a wire cutter or something like that, but I don't really consider those components of. So the one thing about landscape wiring during a construction project is your wire can go into things like trenches and other places where they're safe, protected, and hidden, and then we just kind of loop them up where the fixture is going to be placed, duct tape it to a stake and secure the stake in the ground until you are ready for this phase of landscape lighting wiring. If you were doing it as an addition to an existing, you may be running your wiring and stuff from the transformer and then along walkways and maybe under a walkway or along the base of a fence, someplace where shovels and weed eaters and other things are not going to be hitting the wire at all. Now, when you're doing your cable lengths, you have to do a little bit of pacing off and measuring how much cable you're going to need from where your transformer is placed to where all your fixtures are going to be placed. Make sure you have excessive amount of wire, because you just never can tell, and you might expand later on. Now, the cabling coming back to the transformer, the part we're going to wire up right now, should be someplace right near the transformer, coiled up and ready to go. What I used to do is when the incoming cable was going to be placed up inside the transformer, which you've mounted either in the shed, in the garage, out on an exterior wall, any place that you're placing it, you should have plenty of wire to bring up into the bottom of the stainless steel box or to the bottom of the transformer housing itself, whichever brand you have. And there are many, many brands. What I used to do is I used to protect that exposed part of the cabling by placing it inside a PVC pipe and then running it through the PVC pipe all the way up into the transformer box itself. It looked neater, it looked more professional, and it protected the cabling from rodents or hits with a outdoor tool or whatever. And then you could color code the PVC pipe the same color as your house color, or you can spray paint it a contrasting color to protect the PVC pipe itself. Now, up inside that transformer box, you're going to have a lug line. It might be at the bottom of the box, it might be on the side of the box, depending on your brand. You're going to take your cable, and we're going to say that you're bringing in 2 separate cables to feed your landscape lighting project. So you have 2 coming up into the box and then turning and going to be attached to that lug line that's on there. Take a knife or a little X-Acto knife or something, split the top of that cabling and pull it open, pull it separated now, both of them. And do enough split on it that you can carefully get those up into whatever power lugs you're going to use and the common. Strip off about 3/4 of an inch of that casing. Find your common lug. 1 wire from each cable will need to go into that common lug. And I used to like to do it so that the cables came in side by side rather than one on top of another. Okay, depending on the type of transformer you may have a fancy one that has what we call a multi-volt lug line. And that can be really, really handy if you have very long runs. You might have a lug line that has a lug for 12 volt, then one for 14, maybe 15, maybe 17 volts. And why do they do that? Depending on the distance you're going, that transformer is going to throw just a couple extra volts a little further down line through that cable for you, where you don't end up with what we call voltage drop. And voltage drop is very common both in semi-professional installations and DIY installations because we put too many fixtures on a single cable. And we often use incandescent bulbs when we could be using LED bulbs, using far less wattage. Most of the cabling you're going to use, the most available that's out there, is 12-2 cabling. Here's a picture of it right here. So now you've brought in your 2 common wires into your common lug and you've secured it down. You've done a little tug test on it, make sure they're really secure. The other 2 legs you have taken and put into your power lugs. Maybe they're color coded, maybe they're just brass. There's 2 separate ones, you put 1 in each. Now you've kind of completed the transformer side of the wiring. Now, all the cabling that you have that goes out to the yard, now it's fixture time. Fixtures oftentimes have just 2 legs. They're generally about 16-2 wire, sometimes even 18-2, really small wire. You've assembled them according to your directions. You've placed them next to the stake with the little cable loop that you've already done. Or at least maybe you've marked it with a flag if you're doing a landscape addition and you're putting lighting into an existing yard. So maybe you've driven stakes out there where they're going to go, maybe you put flags out there where they're going to go, or maybe you've used the fixtures themselves and you've just placed them out in the yard. Now it's time to either cut those loops or bring the cable to each fixture. We're going to cut that cable, we're going to split it again, we're going to take off some of the casing, you're going to take off some of the casing of the fixture wire, and you're going to wire them up. You're going to have your cable legs that are coming up like this, and then your fixture leg that's coming up like this. So you're going to wire 3 at a time to connect those. And then you're going to continue on down the line to your last fixture. So here's a little example again at the demonstration table of how we wire up those fixtures. Super simple, super easy. Just make sure you get it right. It is kind of a unipolar type of thing, so you can't mess them up. Just because you do this wire to this wire and that wire to that, it won't matter. You're not going to short anything out, okay? All right, so let's take a look at it. I'll be right back. Okay, let's take a second and demonstrate the ease of which you can do your own landscape lighting wiring. Starting at the transformer, wiring up your cable, and then demonstrating. Obviously, we're not out in the field here at a project. Out in the field, we'll wire it up to a fixture, okay? So let's take a look. Now we have one of the more super basic transformer timers here. This is a brand from one of the box stores. And this is what I was telling you about, the lug line that sits on the bottom of the transformer. So this is going to hang on the wall like this, and your connections are going to be underneath here. And when you look at the lug line, you'll see 2 greens and 2 reds. So taking your cabling, simple tools, almost the same as for the irrigation. You have a screwdriver, wire stripper. You can use a knife to split the cable, since this is 2-strand cable. Remember I told you about the sizes. This particular one, because we're demonstrating it here, this is 16-2 cable. So if you had 12-2 or 10-2 or 8-2, this would be much larger. And opposite of that is if you went down to 18-2, which 18-2 I have not seen used in a landscape application, except for maybe one fixture, and that would be it. So taking this, we're going to strip off about 3/4 of an inch. Take it and firm up your wire by just a couple of gentle twists. Do the other one. Couple of gentle twists. Put on your old man glasses if you need them. And then you're going to find one side is going to go into the green, or the grounding side, and the other side's going to go into the red side. Do not have your transformer plugged in at this point. It'll be unplugged for now. Tighten those 2 lugs down really well. Give a tug test. Nice and secure. Now sometimes you may want to secure your outgoing cable in the cable gather here. It's not necessary, but you can. It just tends to neaten it on the underside of the transformer. I'm not going to show you that right now, but there's an option there, and it's just secured with a little nut. Now, out in the field, we have our fixture, okay? And our fixture should be kind of pre-assembled like what you see here, and then laying down at the position or location that you're going to use it. This is an uplight or a spotlight. So most likely this is going to be doing something on uplighting trees, maybe uplighting a feature, a focal point, you know, like a small fountain, something like that. And it will have 12-2, 16-2, as you can see. This is the same size, one size down. So this is 18-2 cable at the fixture and 16-2 cable feeding it. So you'll have plenty of amperage. Here's a cautionary tale. Most of the time, the quick connectors that a lot of the box stores and things provide, yes, they do work. I'm not going to badmouth them regarding initial quality, But what I have found, especially for folks who have a colder area in the wintertime, the prongs, the sharp little stab prongs that go into this, they tend to widen and contract over a season or two, sometimes just one season. I am not a fan of multi-year use for these. I really not. Now, if you're in an area that's generally warm most of the year, I mean, you don't get sub-freezing temperatures, I would go ahead and use it. The worst thing that you have to do is come back, cut it off, and hardwire it to your supply wire. But just a cautionary note. Cautionary note. So what I would do is I would split this at the fixture end, go ahead and strip off. I generally did about an inch on these guys. And then you can wire these guys in. You'll have your supply line coming on this side, and then your fixture side coming in there. And then you'll tighten those back down. Like that. So the end result is it's going to look just about like that. Now, if you want to do it like most of the pros do it, you're going to cut this off, split it down, and you're going to hardwire both of these together, and then use the dry lock connectors to screw those down, and then tuck this down in where your stake's going to go. Now, the brand of this particular fixture does not have a stake large enough to accommodate a stuffing of the connection back up inside. Some of the upgraded ones will. They'll have a slot up in there that you can get a lot of your connections stuffed inside the stake, and it's up out of the ground. If you have one like this, then it's going to be coiled up right next to the stake, and it's going to sit in the dirt. And you can see in colder areas how a pronged type of connection might fail after a little while. But I'll let you guys make your own informed decision on that. Now, we are talking about incandescent. This particular light here is already an LED. You can see it. And here's the wattage that you have right here. And the best way to remember how to set up your lighting system is start at your transformer, and it'll be like this one's a 120 watt transformer. And so you know that you can only put up to 120 watts on that transformer. With one fixture here, you've used up 4.2 watts. Now, add up all the fixtures that you're going to put in your project. Maybe you have a dozen lights out in the backyard, and the total with using all LED stuff only comes up to like 50, maybe 60, maybe 70, but you're still well within a very small transformer, and you've used LEDs, which are going to last you 10 times longer than the standard incandescents. So if you do get a fixture that has the old incandescents, you can go and get LED spotlights, which would work for something like this fixture, or path lights. This particular one is a pronged insert, but you can also find the wedge ones as well. Okay, once you get them all wired up, all your fixtures are in, your bulbs are in each fixture, it's perfectly okay. You've checked all your work, all your connections are tug tested, you've double checked your transformer, the transformer is plugged in, it's time to throw that switch and turn everything on. Go out and check each fixture. You have not put them in place yet, they're just laying there. And check each fixture and make sure that the bulbs are working. If they are, boom, nice job. If they're not, obviously a little troubleshooting is going to be needed, okay? But if you had followed those directions and you followed everything that the manufacturer of the transformer and the lights and everything that you've gotten, plus me, you should be 100%. You really should. And you can see that it's not really complicated type of stuff. Where people make the biggest mistakes is they put too many fixtures on one line. If you have a multi-tap type of transformer, use them. Maybe you're putting 10 fixtures in the backyard. Use 2 cables. That way you only have 5 on one wire and 5 on another. And that way you don't have that voltage drop. Again, remember to use LED bulbs. They're going to cause a little more cash to come out of your wallet at first, but they're going to last 10 times longer down the road. So, did everything come on? Perfect. Nicely done. Or if they didn't, you had to go back and do some checking, but you got it working? Perfect. Now it's time to position the lights that you have in the ground, tapping them down into the ground or whatever you need to do to display them correctly, and then hide your wiring work. That may mean you need to dig a little hole. That may mean you need to sequester it up inside some of the stakes that have a hollow orifice in the middle, and you can place them up in there, protect them. What I used to do is I used to use dry lock connectors, and then I would electrical tape those, and I would bury them right at the base of the stake. They always worked for many, many years, trouble-free. So you can see now, between irrigation wiring and landscape wiring, it's not that difficult. Step by step by step. Is it tedious? Yeah, some people might consider it tedious. If it's 105 in the shade and you're out there in the sun wiring stuff up, it might be tedious. But I used to like it. And the reason I did is because I knew I was closing in on that landscape project finish line. And it was generally kind of a clean day for me. You know, I wasn't down in the trenches getting all ugly and dirty and sweaty and etc. I hope this brought you a little closer to knowing exactly what and how to do it. I hope the demonstrations that I did here helped you really realize on how to do it and that you can do it. Just remember, if you can't get out of the starting gate with something like this, hey, call somebody, one of your local professionals to come out and do it. Anyway, guys, that's what I have for you this week. Thank you for all the business that people have sent us this past week. Thank you, Dave in Tennessee, for our landscape consultation discussion. I really hope to see a completed project this year for you back there. Also, the people who got the books, got the checklist, etc., very much appreciate your business and your trust. If there's anything I can do, I'm only an email away at youryardcoach@gmail.com. Don't forget the website where those products are available, and check out our Amazon store where we do have some lighting equipment. And a little bit of that sale goes to us. Not very much, but a little bit. Every little bit helps. Guys, as always, to your landscape success, I'll see you next Friday. Take care. Bye for now.